Social Venture Network, and I want to thank Awareness Media also, because you're bringing the thoughts to people that need to hear this message, and to know that there is an organization out there that really cares, and that the entrepreneurs are, not only doing their businesses, but they want to make changes in this world to make it a better place for everyone. And so I thank you very much.
I'm Mike Lapam. I'm Project Director of the Responsible Wealth Project at United for a Fair Economy in Boston. And we organize wealthy individuals, business owners, investors, inheritors to use their voice in Congress, in the media, in boardrooms, to say, I'm upper income, I should have a higher tax rate. I believe, I'm wealthy, I believe we should have a strong estate tax for people like me who've benefited from this country. And I'm a business owner, I think we should have a living wage. I'm a shareholder, I think we should have more corporate accountability. So kind of the unexpected voice of wealthy people who believe that we need less inequality, not more. It's going well. I mean, fortunately in this country, there are, among the haves, there are people who get that more inequality is not a good thing for them, not a good thing for our society, not a good thing for their children, for our future, and are willing to speak up and sort of counteract the voice of greed that exists, so responsible wealth members are people like that who get that they've done really well, but they've done it with the help of, government investment and education and research and regulations that make their business support, business success possible. They get that we need more of that investment, and the people like them like us, who have benefited, so much from what this society offers, have a responsibility to pay, higher taxes and to be more accountable as upper income folks. Well, Responsible Wealth is a project of a nonprofit called United for a Fair Economy. Started back in about '95 as an organization called Share the Wealth. 2 out of 3 of those words were kind of threatening to people, so everyone was fine with the word "the," but share and wealth made people uncomfortable. They changed the name to United for a Fair Economy. So United for a Fair Economy is a nonprofit, grassroots organization that basically is trying to call attention to the growing income and wealth divide in the country and how it's not good for our society. It undermines our democracy, and it deepens the racial wealth divide, pulls communities apart. So we're trying to call attention to that and lead people to action that they can take, policy change action. And we're trying to do movement building, trying to provide resources that people can use in their work to call attention to this growing income and wealth gap. What can they do about it, and how can we close that gap? Responsible Wealth is part of a nonprofit called United for a Fair Economy that started about in 1995, dedicated to calling attention to the growing income and wealth gap and how that's bad for our society, undermines our democracy, and really pulls communities apart, deepens the racial wealth divide. We're trying to call attention to that and educate people and move them to actions that they can take to help narrow the gap. And so Responsible Wealth is, after a couple of years of organizing and doing popular education workshops and a lot of street theater and things, we would find after workshops that we do, one lone CEO or wealthy person would come up and say, look, I'm part of that top 5%, that top 1% that is benefiting from all this inequality. What's my role? So we realized that there was a role for organizing this countervailing voice of wealthy people who are saying, I don't need another tax break. I believe we should have a strong estate tax. I believe we should have a living wage. And counteracting that voice of greed that is so well represented in Congress and in the media. So that's what we've been doing for about 15 years now, organizing business leaders, investors, inheritors in that top 5% to use their voice, to sort of use that surprising voice to stand up and say, look, I don't need that tax break. I don't agree with that conventional wisdom that lower lower wages help business. I don't agree with that. And so let's not let business people be the poster children for more tax cuts that really hurt our society. So it's a very powerful voice when the haves, when Warren Buffett and George Soros and Bill Gates, Jimmy Carter last December spoke out for a stronger estate tax. These are all, 36 of the most, prominent people in the country said we should have a stronger estate tax than we have now. And the estate tax was strengthened for the first time in 28 years. So that makes a big difference when those people weigh in. I think what's changed is that they're being organized. I mean, I think fortunately there are people among the elites who have this understanding that we can't have more and more concentration of wealth, that hurts our society, and are willing to step out and both fund organizations that are doing that good work, but also use their voice. Because you can imagine if all the rich folks thought we want more money in the hands of the rich folks, there's enough of that happening already, but if there wasn't this countervailing voice of wealthy people and people willing to support that work, we'd be like a lot of countries, developing countries where there's so much concentration of wealth, or you look at some of the South American countries, et cetera, where there's just so much power in the hands of the elite. So at least, fortunately, we have people like George Soros and Bill Gates, many people who are willing to support this kind of progressive work. The greatest challenge. I mean, wow. There's so many challenges out there. I think a challenge for a group like ours is just getting attention to the issues. On any given day, there's so many things that need attention, whether it's poverty or the military or terrorism or different things that are in the news, healthcare and so forth. So, our group has a particular focus on more progressive taxes, and a lot of people don't like to talk about taxes. It's not sexy to talk about taxes, but the reality is, we need more progressive taxes to pay for the kinds of things that make our society work: good education, good infrastructure. No one wants government until there's a bombing and they say, where was the government? Where was the anti-terrorism? Why wasn't this guy surveilled? No one wants to pay taxes until there's another E. coli outbreak and they say, where was the food inspection? They don't want to pay for what government does, but they sure want government there when there's an oil spill in the Gulf or whatever. After the fact, it's where was government? And the reality is, people want the stuff that government does, they just don't want to pay for it, right? So that's, getting people's attention to that issue is our biggest challenge, trying to get that issue in front of the media, in front of Congress, et cetera. I think any time there's exposure to these issues, for people just to know there's a group like Responsible Wealth organizing and, a place for, if you're in that top 5%, in that top 1%, knowing there's a group that's organizing for you to use your voice. So you're not out there on your own, some crazy guy who thinks his taxes should be higher. You're part of a network of 500 people around the country who, when you speak out, you've got all these other 499 people have your back. And this organization, United for a Fair Economy, Responsible Wealth, are providing you the talking points and the information to back up what you're saying. So people are much less likely to write that letter to the editor or op-ed if they think they're alone, but if they know there's a bunch of other people and some of them known to them, that gives them the backing to feel more confident to step out and use their voice. I personally got into this work, had about a 10-year career in housing before getting into this. Was friends with another guy who was a great-grandson, Chuck Collins, grandson of Oscar Mayer, the meat packer. He was one of the founders of United for a Fair Economy. But I really got into this work. I grew up in Rochester, New York. I knew my grandfather worked at a paper mill 5 hours away in Glens Falls, New York, where both of my parents were from. We'd go there in the summers. It wasn't until I was 16 that my parents and grandparents took us up to the woodlands and said, that company that Grandpa works at, our family has owned since for 5 generations. And suddenly I had to deal with the fact that I'm wealthy. And they said, don't tell anyone you're wealthy. They'll try to take advantage of you. They might want to marry you, So I spent the next 16 or so years following that advice and really keeping it under wraps. If people talked about student loans, I'd change the subject, stuff like that. And then I came across United for a Fair Economy and this idea of starting the Responsible Wealth Project. I co-founded that and sort of did a 180-degree turn and said, I'm going to use my wealth as an access to organize other people with wealth, to get in the door to talk to these folks. And I'm going to speak out as a wealthy person and say, I don't need another tax break. So I've been on television, I've been in national press talking about this stuff. But because I came from that background, I was able to organize people here at Social Venture Network and other business leaders and wealthy folks all around the country to use their voice. So I've sort of turned it around, and the last 16 years of my life have been really using that privilege of my own and trying to organize other folks. The pushback. I think we're here at Social Venture Network. Just last night I was sitting at a table with a friend of mine in this network who's shall remain nameless, but family, he's about to come into a whole lot of money in the many, many millions, if not billions of dollars. We have a disagreement about the estate tax. Should you, if you've lived a long life and you end up with 10 million or 100 million or $1 billion, should some of that go back to the society that made it possible? If you grew up in Somalia, would you have earned that, hadn't had the same idea and worked as hard? How much of that money would you have? So how much of that money really is owed to the society that you're in, to the opportunity that's created by living in the United States? So I believe Bill Gates Sr. has said for a dozen years now, you owe some of that back to the society that made that wealth possible. So this individual and I were having a, polite conversation about, how much is the government entitled to? Before he inherits this money, he didn't work for it. He's inheriting it from his grandfather and from his father. And what's fair? And what level of taxation is fair? People tend to think that the cutoff should be somewhere around $1 million or so more than they have or more than they're going to inherit. But so there's taxes, and the estate tax can be a very sensitive, emotional issue. It's unfortunately at the time of death of someone who you care a lot about, you're paying this tax. The opponents of the estate tax have really tried to take advantage of that fact. They've also used farms and small businesses as the poster children for why we should not have an estate tax. And the reality is very few farms, very few small businesses pay an estate tax, and they have ways of paying it over 14 years. So there's arguments, but it's a very powerful, their side of the anti-estate tax folks have a very powerful sounding. They have this, these poster children who are tug on the heartstrings, small businesses, farmers. But the reality is that most of the people paying an estate tax are just really wealthy people who have benefited a lot from the society, and many of them inherited the money themselves. So it can be an emotion. Taxes in general can be, and then people don't necessarily like where their tax money is going, what it's being spent for. I don't agree with everything that it's being spent on, but the question is, who should pay more? Should we tax dead millionaires and billionaires, or should we tax, working people who are, trying to make ends meet? I think that's an easy question. Other people, no one really wants to be taxed, but that's the balance that we're making. Do you mean the Gates Buffett giving pledge? We didn't, my organization didn't have anything directly to do with that. We've actually done something called the Tax Fairness Pledge for years, which is where wealthy individuals could calculate, and you can still do this on our website. You plug in a couple numbers from your tax return at responsiblewealth.org, and you can figure out how much you've saved from the Bush tax cuts, from the capital gains cuts, from the income rates being down, and people have pledged to give that away to support work on more progressive taxes for about 10 or 12 years now. The Gates and Buffett giving pledge is really about asking the folks on the Forbes 400, the really wealthiest of the wealthy, to pledge to give away their money, at least 50% of it when they die, and which is great. I think many of them often do because of the incentive created by the estate tax. Many of them would give away a lot of their money anyway, but it challenges them, and it also challenges some of them to think about giving it away during their lifetime, which is great. The sooner the better. There's a lot of needs out there for it. I think the dangerous part of it is, if you start thinking that wealthy people like them giving away their money is somehow a substitute for what government can do and for taxes, because there's things that government does really well, and there's things that private money and foundations can do really well, and they're very different. But we're never gonna. Taxes and government can't be voluntary. We have to tax, the people who have the most at a higher rate in order to pay for the things that we all benefit from. Yeah, I think, one of the great things about being here at Social Venture Network is that these are all businesses who are trying to use their business to do something positive in the world, whether it's just paying their employees a living wage, whether it's fair trade, whether it's treating the environment better, seventh generation, making products that are better for the environment, whether it's Ben & Jerry's selling ice cream so that they can support other causes. So this is a wonderful group of people who are showing that you can do business in a different way with a different purpose. There's a lot of, I think there's a lot of room in a lot of companies for improvement, whether it's just, fairer pay. The CEO is getting paid $10 million, and the lowest paid worker is getting 10,000, and that's crazy, So even if, greater responsibility means closing that pay gap so that people working full time can earn enough. There's a lot of ways that we can put pressure on companies to do a better job, and so there's a lot of things that investing more proactively can do. You can, whether it's shareholder resolutions or just screening your portfolio so that you're investing in the companies that are doing good things. I think there's a ton of untapped power out there for using the power in investments, using pension funds, using endowments, et cetera, to invest in good stuff and influence the business world by doing that. I think some of the work on things like climate change and clean water and other social justice issues are really going to be have to be undertaken by nonprofits. So it may be that there are for-profit organizations that are earning the money so that they can fund these other causes. Or there's Credo Mobile used to be Working Assets. They have a long-distance company so that they can do activism. Their DNA is about the activism, but they're using the for-profit to do that. So I think there's a possibility for a lot of companies to do good that way by making the profit and funding the nonprofit work or the more activist work that way. You know, there's some, it's a really interesting time. There's some big battles going on in Congress these days, and in the media, in the world of public opinion, you know, in this country about are we going to, you know, raise taxes again? We did an experiment where we cut taxes, you know, all during the Bush era, and a lot of the Obama, you know, administration. We've had lowered taxes for most people. We're finding that, you know, we can't really do the things that we want to do as a society. So we had the sequester this year. You know, we're starting to feel the pain in airports and in other government agencies who are having to cut back on things that people count on. So there's a real big debate about, should we raise taxes on, you know, millionaires only? Should we raise taxes on people over $250,000, as Responsible Wealth has advocated for? Do we need to raise taxes on everyone, really? And at the state level, there's a lot of battles going on, because at the state level, you've got regressive taxes. Lower income people, you know, are paying 11% of their income in taxes. Upper income people paying 4 and 5%. It's backwards from the way it should be, because those lower income people need all their money to survive. It all goes out the door at the end of the year. You know, the upper income people have the capacity to pay more. So are we going to decide as a society that we want to tax the people who have more and have adequate resources to fund our education, fund our infrastructure, reinvest in the country, invest in the kind of healthcare and research and regulation and, you know, all the things that make business success possible, that make prosperity possible? Are we going to allow ourselves to do that, or are we going to keep going on this austerity model that really drags us down? So there's a huge debate, and I think the voice of wealthy people saying, yes, tax me more, is going to be a really important part of that debate. There's a good chance I'll be right where I am at Responsible Wealth, you know, leading the way and cheering on, you know, getting the voice of wealthy people into Congress, into the media, into boardrooms, just as we're doing now, but hopefully, you know, probably using a whole lot of technologies that we haven't even dreamed of, and you know, maybe double the size membership, you know, and there will be a fight, you know. I'm sure 5 years from now we'll still be fighting this fight. So I may very well be right in the same seat as part of that fight. Sure. Mike Lapam, I'm the project director at Responsible Wealth, which is a project of United for a Fair Economy in Boston.